Hi everyone, welcome back to Disturbing Your Peace. We're super excited that you joined us again for another episode. Thank you all so much for the love on our other episode about the struggles of being first-gen college students. So today we have our second guests. They're Iman and Luna. They're actually our friends from college, and we're always talking about, the struggles of being East African, especially being in the diaspora. So we thought we'd bring this conversation to Disturbing Your Peace because it made sense. So yeah.
Yes. So today in our episode, we're basically going to be talking about being East African, specifically from the Horn, because we're Eritrean, Ethiopian, Somali, Oromo. So we're basically going to talk about what we face on a daily basis, the misconceptions people have, and different things that preserve our peace and disturb our peace.
This is a conversation that we have like a lot of times, I think, because it's such a big part of our identity. Of course, it is topic of discussion sometimes. And I think the reason why we have it a lot is because there's so many different facets of the one identity, and it has a lot of different things that are intertwined. So during this episode, we're going to be using the word East African to mostly just refer to the Horn of Africa. Big ups Zanzibar, big ups Tanzania, big ups the I love all of East Africa. I love all of Africa. So just in terms of like wording, that's really what we're going to be talking about when we do say East Africa. We're going to be talking about our individual and shared experiences. So yeah, hi Luna and hi Iman. Do you want to say a little bit about yourselves?
Yeah, hi.
You might have upcoming. Hey.
Yeah, hi, my name is Luna. I am a recent graduate from the University of Washington. But yeah.
Gang!
Black excellence. My name is Iman, and I'm also a graduate from UW. So basically, we started a podcast called Shakur Entertainment, kind of similar to y'all, but we did it over IG. We're in the process of trying to, get it to a real podcast. So tune in once we do. But we're so excited to be here, and we talk about this stuff all the time. But I'm happy to actually do this with y'all on this platform. So love to see it.
Definitely. Do you guys want to start off with going around and just identifying or saying what we identify as when it comes to our East African identity?
Yeah,
I can start. I'm Somali Oromo.
I'm Somali. I'm really basic Somali.
I'm Somali as well.
I'm Ethiopian.
and I'm Eritrean.
Did we all say our identities?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's all of us.
Just an FYI for non-East Africans, East Africa is technically 11 countries, but the Horn is known to dominate the conversation, and we understand that, but this is just based on our experience, as Zaytun said. So this is not all of East Africa. We're not saying we're all of East Africa, but that's just what I asked. Should I start what disturbs my peace the most with the East African identity? For me, so I'm Somali, so I'm Muslim. So I feel a lot of times what disturbs my peace is that my Muslim identity kind of removes my Blackness and my African identity for some reason. So and we'll go more into detail, but I feel a lot of times I don't really fully fit into the whole Africa spiel, so the African student unions, for instance, or African events and stuff like that, because I feel it's awkward because people see me as Muslim, so they automatically assume I'm Arab or I'm Pakistani or I'm Indian. Although I am on a wider scale, but I swear I look Black. Something I know, something in me shows that I'm Black. So it's kind of that's the thing that really disturbs my peace. I'm not sure if you guys have similar experiences.
I definitely.
I agree with everything.
Yeah?
I agree with everything she said. Yeah, I feel that a lot.
Yeah, I think honestly, it really, because a lot of people when they're talking about Africa, they have a monolithic view of what it means to be African. And a lot of the times they don't associate Islam with that when I think Africans are one of the largest groups of, I think most Muslims come from Africa. That's actually a lie, never mind. But there's a lot of Muslims that come from Africa, right? But people don't really see that because that's not what you see on mainstream television and stuff. So, but then what they see on television is Arabs, Pakistanis, and those Middle Eastern and Southeast Asian communities representing Islam. So I think that's where it stems from, and I definitely do agree with your experiences as an East African or Somali American, and not feeling represented in both groups.
I also think it's a disrespect to Islamic history because East Africa had a huge part of Islam. The first Muslims were saved in Abyssinia, and they were welcome. And that's so big on our history, and we're constantly taught about it. But I feel there's no emphasis on it. People be focusing on little random. They have their history too, but out of country, they did this for Islam, but it's Habibi, if Abyssinia was not a thing, we would not all be here, and that's true. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I find that really ox that like they just erase that aspect of it, and like I'm always reminded. I even erase it myself. I'm always reminded of it. Like when I do like listen to khutbah about it and stuff like that, I'm like, oh my god, that was in East Africa, or even like so problematic. Everybody hates me for saying this. Remember when I tweeted, I smiled knowing Obama's East African, and everybody got mad at me.
Rightfully so. Rightfully so.
I can't stand you, bro.
Anyways, but like he had a little Muslim too, so I think it's important.
Hold it on. I'm screaming.
We do not like Obama on this
Erase
podcast.
Islam.
We don't like Obama.
Yeah.
We don't have Obama shirt right to my right.
We don't stand Obama
we don't
on this
talk
podcast.
about it.
I smile knowing Obama was East African, his dad was Muslim. That just sits right with my spirit. I don't know about y'all. I smile knowing that's true.
No, and I knew he was East African. Like I was in 2nd or 3rd grade when he got elected. It was like right when I came to the U.S. So homegirl had just learned English, so I was calling him Black Obama, and I used to convince my whole class that he was like he's literally my uncle. I was like, you see, his middle name is Hussein. My middle name is Hussein. His parents are like one of his parents. The black one is from Kenya. I was born in Kenya.
You're like, it makes sense.
The dots.
It clicks.
Connect the dots.
I still claim Obama's my dad, although I have a dad. But yeah, dad issues.
That's toxic.
What are other elements? Like, so Iman, you're Ethiopian Muslim. Do you think that like your Muslim identity played a part in like college and stuff like that, like fitting into like the Black culture, or like like how did that like make it different for you? You would say.
Yeah, I agree with what you said earlier, like people thinking once you're Muslim that you can't be Black, because a lot of people, like when I tell them, oh, I'm Ethiopian and I'm Muslim, even in the Ethiopian community, they kind of look at you like you're Muslim. Like it's kind of like a weird, like it's like obviously like there's religious diversity back home, but I think here we've grouped people into certain groups and don't see any type of intermixing happening, or just maybe friend groups. If you're not exposed to certain people, you don't think they exist, which is kind of weird. But that has been like a reoccurring thing. I also think probably like my skin tone, like you said, I think because I'm lighter, people think like I'm Yemeni or I'm like Arab, and so when I tell them I'm Black, they're like, there's no way that you're Black, like how are you Muslim then? And it's like people misconstrue like religion from your race, and like that they're very different things. Like you can still be Muslim and be any race, and you can still be Ethiopian and be of any part and still be Muslim as well. So I think people just misconstrue both. So it's been really awkward of like having to not prove my Blackness, but like have to explain it to people like over like a lot of times. So it's just kind of weird. Like they'll be like, oh, you're Black. It's like, oh, okay. Like they have to still digest my identity before they accept me for being, Black and Muslim and Ethiopian. So it's like feels weird that I have to constantly explain it.
That definitely makes sense.
Yeah.
I was wondering, like, do you guys, like, this could be for, question could be for Lona, but do you guys think that the reason for people disassociating East Africans, particularly the Horn, from Blackness comes from anti-Blackness within our own communities, or do you guys think that it comes from elsewhere?
Yeah, I could kind of talk about that. Me and Iman on our podcast kind of dove into how it's so internalized and how we just don't see ourselves as Black. And it comes from a culture of like constantly trying to associate ourselves with like Arabs. And I think it's so weird because now like that we're trying to transition more into like being accepted within the Black identity. We find a lot of contradictions in our own community of like, oh, well, a lot of community members don't believe we're Black. So how do we go against that narrative and like actually try to build more like Black awareness within our communities? And so I feel like it's a battle that we're fighting within our community and outside of our community of like trying to be accepted in this identity that we are, but people aren't naturalized to like understanding why we're Black. And I think that's just because of many years. And I think that also really came strongly from the Abyssinian Empire, right? Like this constant idea of like, oh, we're related to like Queen of Sheba, and like this idea of like, oh, we have a lot of descent, and it's like, yeah, like
toxic.
Obviously that was from colonization. Like that's not something to be proud of though.
Yeah.
And like just because we mix in with these like different races doesn't necessarily mean that's our dominant race. Like we're originally Black. Like we are from Africa. Our origin is within like Black people. So it's like, why are we choosing the identity that we literally adopted just from colonization as being like our main identity? So it's a really weird concept and like thing to play around with, especially within our community.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like a lot of times people don't understand that, like, just because your country has like, oh, we claimed independence 1960 whatever, 1970 whatever, that like decolonization is not like a one-time event, and it's not like a battle. It's really a war if you think about it, because not only are we like fighting, like you said, a battle on two fronts of like a new like perceived identity versus like identity that like we've always belonged to, and we are the beginning of the earth, really. So it's just really interesting how much work has to be done in terms of decolonizing our thought. And I think it's also like an internal and like self-reflective battle as well, because we have to really think about like how many of my beliefs or how many of my actions are triggered by colonial mindsets, And I didn't really start thinking about that until I like got to college and started taking like these like classes about like East African history. I took a class that was specifically in big ups Anu Taranath, like, oh my God, how want to Dr. Anu, big ups Dr. Anu. I took her class. It was my first class ever, and it was this like English 300 class. And we just read work from East African people, from like this man in Tanzania, this man in Kenya. It was just a lot of like, it was so really, really inspiring, because we don't see that often. When we talk about Africa, we talk about like a monolith, and it further like perpetuates this idea of you are this or that. Yeah. And it's really not. There is so much nuance to be had there.
Yeah.
Exactly. I also think it's like when you talk about American context, like we have pushed back within our communities from being associated with Blackness for so long. And like you said, now there's been a push towards like Pan-Africanism and understanding what that means and like wanting to reclaim our Blackness. But there's a reason why like we've been disassociated from the Black community for so long, and why we have issues even accepting ourselves as Black. It's like we don't even intermingle, or like also the rhetoric our parents grew up with like Black being seen as bad or like inferior. So we wanted to like disassociate ourselves from that and see ourselves as like quote unquote better, whatever that means. So I feel like that, like now that we're trying to come into terms with our Black identity, it's like you can't just pick and choose when you're Black. You can't be Black when it's convenient. So it's like understanding that it's deeper than just saying I'm Black, but really understanding that you've always been Black, you just didn't want to be Black. So it's just, it's a whole thing, but I'm glad we're talking about this.
Yeah, I also think it's like super problematic how a lot of times like a lot of people label East Africans beautiful, all these things, but then they like try to justify the beauty of our culture, the beauty of our women, the beauty of our men. This is not men, but true. I'm joking. Or like, our food and stuff like that. They try to tell us, oh, it's because you're colonized by Italy, or it's because you have out of identity. It's like, no, I always had this. Like, I've always been pretty. Like, me being colonized by out of guy does not make me beautiful. You know what I mean? It's like, as Zaytun said, like, East Africa was one of the first people in civilization. So it's like a lot of times, like, people try to like discredit us. It's like, like, no, ma'am, like, I'm not pretty.
When they start talking about like beauty within the East African community, they, first of all, they're not talking about East Africa as a whole. They're talking about the Horn, and within the Horn, they're talking about a specific phenotype that doesn't exist throughout the whole entire Horn. I don't think that most East Africans have 3B hair, light skin, have a certain body type. When that's when they're talking about that. So, do you guys, when you guys hear this rhetoric, do you guys see it as I don't know how to say this word. Could
like fetishization?
There you go. That word.
Fetishization.
There you go.
It's a hard word. It's a really hard word.
It is hard. It's a tongue twister.
Or like, and disingenuous, and why do you think East Africans, or specifically Horn of Africans, continue to play into that sort of anti-Black phenotype? Like, I don't know how to explain it, but you guys know what I'm
I feel like I don't even know how to explain it. For sure is fetishization, like 100%. I think mostly this association just goes to try to create this narrative that Black women can be beautiful, and that simply once you mix like lighter complexion with them. So when we talk about like even like during slavery and stuff, lighter women were seen as more feminine. So this idea of like, oh, the lighter you are as a Black woman, the more feminine, the more beautiful you are. And so I think that really plays a toll in East Africa because, and you can see this even within the country, only certain ethnic groups are really highlighted when it comes to what it looks like to be a beautiful East African, right? Like even within like Ethiopia and Eritrea, like a lot of people don't get acknowledgement of being called beautiful because they have darker complexion, and like majority of that ethnic group does have a darker complexion. And so a lot of times it's only upliftment within, like, I can even say an example in Eritrea, like Tigrinya people get more clout off of their skin tone because we're, you know, seen as more lighter than compared to the rest of the country. And it's something I didn't even realize until I started looking at more of like the geography of the country, and like also what groups were actually being acknowledged when it came to that perception of exotic women that other non-East Africans compare us to. And so I think it really is a fetishization, and it's all based off this perception of trying to get women that look more feminine and look more white. It's more white centric. And so always trying to reach for that. And so them finding out like, oh, East African women, and when I say East African women, I'm talking about just the little few that they believe are the whole East Africa, are lighter skin. They're like, oh yeah, perfect. We found exotic African women that, wow, like they're so beautiful. And it's like, in reality, it's like, you know, you're chasing after, you know, the white race. And by doing that, you're trying to make it more progressive by associating it with Blackness. And it's not
regressive.
Also, I think that a lot of times like hip hop artists and a lot of entertainment artists like continue to uplift that narrative. So like
cough Drake.
East African girl, I love Drake, I love him. Young East African girl. I was sadly one of the few people who thought that was beautiful. I thought he was acknowledging me, but I didn't even fit the whole thing. You know, I don't fit the whole character. Like I don't got a big butt. Like, you know, there's so much thing. It's awkward. Like I'm only half. Like, you know, it's also like the other issue is that like a lot of times, like back in the early 2000s, a lot of African immigrants were coming. Like a lot of people used to bully a lot of Africans for being African, all that stuff. And I think a lot of times, like now they're trying to switch up the narrative. Like, no, we love you. Look at this. We put you on a song. Like we're talking about Ethiopian women. We're talking about Somali women. We gave a shout out to Somali. But it's like you're literally like you're kind of making us relive the stereotypes that we're trying to remove and decolonize. It's a lot of times like when they say young East African girl, it's like light skin, and they have like a girl with like 3B hair, a girl that's curvier, or like just fits that narrative. But all East African women look like that. Like we have a lot of beautiful dark skinned women who have 4C hair. Like this is still in East Africa. Like bro, we're African. Like, what do you expect us to look like? So it's like sometimes I think that a lot of rappers try to claim that they're like uplifting women by just dropping the name Somali, just dropping the name Eritrea, Ethiopia, and they do get clout because like I know since we were talking about this, but I feel like a lot of times we fetishize ourselves. Like a lot of East Africans, we literally like promote ourselves. Like we literally like post ourselves like and boost ourselves up. Like I suffered from that a lot of times. I feel like a lot of times I still maybe do that. Like I'm only around East Africans. I'm only around people who look like me. And then when the narrative does come to other Africans, it's always awkward. And it's like, oh, okay. Because we do get called out a lot of times. We do internalize this. And we think that just because Drake gave us a shout out, we're the best thing in Africa. Maybe no. And Drake gave you a shout out because Drake is a colorist just like you and I. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's awkward. And I feel bad because I understand I'm a light-skinned East African girl. So a lot of times I do see myself represented in all these narratives. But I have friends who are dark skinned who don't get the same acknowledgement. I feel like a lot of times it makes it difficult for them to identify for who they are. Like if you're a dark skinned Somali girl and you say I'm Somali, people are probably like non-Somali are looking at you like, huh, really? Like everything I'm seeing on social media says that you don't look otherwise. Or like if a girl's a non-hijabi and she has 4C hair, it's always awkward. It's like, are you really Somali? Are you mixed? But it's like, no, Somali girls with 4C hair exist in our community. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Especially like, especially the skin tone, like lighter skin. I feel like is a minority within Somali community. Personally, I think that like we live on the equator. That is the hottest place in the whole entire continent. You know what I mean? So like, naturally, majority of us are going to be dark skinned. But then there's like within Somalia, if you go there, it's very rare in like like the bigger cities to see a dark-skinned woman because these women are bleaching themselves to become
I was just gonna say that.
society. And it's very sad to think that we're pushing we're continuing and pushing that narrative that's harmful to women within our own communities. Like,
Yes.
when we hear Drake or these other people talk about East African girl or whatever, we should just always like take a step back, ask ourselves like, what are they referring to? What, like Hadam said, these we're trying to decolonize our minds, and these things are not making it any better because obviously he's talking about a certain type of like East African woman.
Yeah.
It's insane.
It's really sad. It's really sad when you see like the same like colonial mindsets regurgitated and then fed back to you for you to regurgitate to others. And the biggest example I can think of is Somali incel Twitter. Nigga, fuck you guys. This is the point in the podcast where I get heated because I'm fucking mad.
Out of smoke.
Let it out.
Real. Fuck y'all niggas. Y'all ain't shit, okay? I'll find you, cuz. But for real, like, they're so fucking racist. They're just so racist. Like, you're a whole Negro. Like, who do you think you are? Like, what platform do you and your 2 followers have? Like, relax, fam. Like, it's just crazy, like, how brainwashed you are, and you can't even see it. And you're regurgitating. You're literally, like, playing into the white man's hands. Like, this is exactly what he wants you to do, and you're doing it. Ahmed 45689. Come on now.
Screaming. But I also agree with what everyone's saying, and also I think about like our like social media, and also like you said, like artists, like what they portray, like Trey Songz, like all the Habesha or quote unquote, you know, East African, the pretty girls, the light skinned girls that they use, they always are like, you know, built a certain way, like, you know, wavy hair, curly hair, skinny, you know, got a big butt, and like it's like when you're telling everyone like this is what Ethiopian and Eritrean women look like, I'm like, no, you don't look like that. It's like, what does that mean? Does that mean I'm not beautiful because I don't look like that stereotype or that, you know, group of women? And it's like really bad for like, you know, other East African women to feel like they have to be lighter or they have to be, you know, thin with a big butt to be considered beautiful in our own communities. Because like, what's the point of you putting down people in your own community as well, aside from like the mainstream media? It's like, that's toxic to your own mental health. And then also just, you know, women already deal with insecurities and being told on what they're supposed to look like. And so imagine you're getting all that from the outside world of how we live with social media and our platforms. And then on top of that, in your own community, like your own family, it's like, you're just seeing these things. Like, I just feel like it's really like uncomfortable, and it just doesn't, like, there's no reason for it, but we've accepted it, like you said, for the good parts of like Drake giving us a little shout out. Like, what did that really do for anybody? Like, you know,
it's
like
always
useless.
women. It's always women that are the topic of discussion, and whose like beauty and worthiness is always attached to one another. Like your value and how like beautiful you're considered, this like arbitrary standard that is set and is like put together is always what is going to define you. And it's really sad when it's like even people who do fit into this narrative and people who don't, like we're not trying to play this game, you know, like it's a lot of times it's like the come on now, you're not in school anymore, but come on, you can think.
That's how I'd be feeling.
It's really like the commodification of the sexuality of unwilling participants. Like, I don't want to be in this little pretty, like you're in, like you're considered pretty or whatever, and then for your sexuality to be commodified, especially when like, I mean, not only, but like if you're like hijabi, or even if you're not hijabi and trying to be modest, and like that's what people are looking for, and that's what they're trying to identify in you. It's just disgusting, bro. No men look my way, fam. Don't stop it.
That's real.
I think one thing I've noticed though is how we adopt it now in our own communities, and like it's crazy to me because I didn't think it was this big of a problem until I would go back home and people would be like, wow, you look so nice because of your skin tone. And I was like, what? I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I look like y'all. And for me, it was like I had, you know, pictures because, you know, I used to have like skin problems where I would be peeling. So I would have even lighter skin than usual. And so going back home, people would be like, wow, your skin was so nice back then. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I was like, I was literally sick. Like, my skin tone was not cute. Like, I was looking super white, and I was like, I did not like that at all. And so when I go back home, like, even these things of like, oh yeah, like, don't go out in the sun at this time. Like, these things were trained since we're kids, like, to, you know, always try to jump for a white-centric look. And, like, you know, when I was younger, I had like more frizzy, more like coarse like hair, so it looked like, you know, I didn't have that beautiful narrative of a East African woman. And then as I started taking care of my hair, you know, obviously, you know, you defrizz and stuff like that. My 3B hair started showing, and everyone was telling me like, oh my gosh, like you're Eritrean, like I know you're Eritrean, like, oh, you're a baddie, like all this stuff. And I'm like what? Like, hold up, y'all did not like me when I have frizzy hair, and now I'm cute. Like it honestly really it was so hard for me to adapt to it, because I was like, for so long I wasn't perceived as that, and now I'm perceived as that. And it was like, that's something like Zaytun was saying, it's something I didn't want, right? So it was just really weird for me to accept that. And so I'm like I'm saying, like, it's adopted now in our communities, and it's so scary, because now like even East African men expect that out of their women, like, oh yeah, she needs to have whiter skin, oh she needs to have good hair, like, because I want this for my kids. And it's like, whoa, like you're not even married yet, and that's what already you're expecting out of a wife and kids. And it's just so scary, because I just didn't believe like it would become this big of a problem just within our own internal community.
I think it's weird.
Yeah.
A lot of African men like make fun of us for a lot of features we have. Like a lot of East African men make fun of, you know, a lot of East African girls for like looking the way they are. They're like, you're not modest. They make fun of you on Twitter. But the moment like outside people start like showing us interest, it's always like, oh no, like this is our women. You can't say that. And it's like an ongoing. It's a weird struggle. Like men are trash. They make the world a horrible place. We should really get rid of them, so I don't have to wear anything all the time. I hope we normalize this discussion. But the other thing I had was, I was wondering if you guys ever face as East Africans. I feel like a lot of times, like when people talk about West Africa, you know, people like talk about different countries and their culture. Say like example, like Ghana, Nigeria, it's like so distinct. But I feel like a lot of times, especially in like living in the West Coast, I feel like East Africa is literally grouped into one narrative. And I think a lot of times like people like erase our identities and our histories because we're supposed to like live in harmony here. When a lot of times there's crazy things going back home. And I think, like when you do say, oh, I'm East African, or like you're East African, like you kind of erase the fact that I'm Somali, or the fact that like, you know, my people went through this type of things based on this government. Like it's just weird. And I think a lot of times, like I noticed that what destroys my peace, a lot of other African diaspora, they don't bring their business back home to America. And that's maybe a decision they made. But a lot of times us East Africans, we do. And then we're made to feel uncomfortable for that. I remember at Afro one time, Afro-Caribbean Night is an event that happens at the University of Washington. And as usual, East Africans make it political because that's our brand, period. Well, when I say East Africans, right. Africa. And I remember there was this Nigerian lady sitting next to me, and she was like, I hate how you guys always like bring politics back home. Like, can you guys grow up, da da da. And I was like, we're discussing human rights violation. Like, this is not politics. Yeah. This is like human rights violation.
That part.
Yeah, baby, that's your brand. But our brand, like, you know, and I don't know why we're made to feel uncomfortable and that we're labeled the same. Like, it's like, oh, East Africans, but it's like, Kenyans and Ugandans are not doing that. Like, why are y'all erasing their identities based on troublemakers and what they're doing? You know, I'll take somebody for that one. You know, it's just weird that we're made to feel uncomfortable for being proud of our culture, but also being proud of our history and like bringing the injustices that are happening back home and like, you know, protesting or like doing all these things because like people just want us to like come here and ignore everything that's going back home, which I don't understand why.
I think there's. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I was just going to say, I think there's levels to it. I think it's definitely fine to be proud of where you come from as long as you understand your blackness, right? Like you can be both at the same time. I think some people take it overboard where they disassociate from their blackness and they say they're only this country from East Africa. That's when I think it's problematic. I think you should be happy to know if you have the opportunity and you're blessed to know where you come from, knowing your roots, like that's a beautiful thing. Be in touch with yourself, dope. But don't make that an excuse for why you don't associate with your blackness. I feel like a lot of people are like, well, I'm not black, I'm Ethiopian, I have this in my culture, and it's like a flex, and it's like, that's weird, bro. Like, why can't you just be both? Like, why can't you love your culture, your language, where you come from, and also be appreciative that you are black in America and you wouldn't be here if it wasn't for black people in this country? So I just think it's very weird that people can't understand both. And also, like you said, like the politics stuff, I think it's fine to bring politics here as long as, you know, you understand why you're in those spaces or why you're bringing up the politics. Like, I've seen it rip people apart for wrong reasons. Like, if you just want to be like disrespectful and have opposing political views just to do it, I feel like that's corny. If you're talking about human rights violations, there's no if, and, or but situation. You should be talking about that because that's your people, you're watching it happen. So that I agree with everything. Like that doesn't need to be considered politics. Like, that's different.
Yeah,
I think I think like one big issue too that even happens in like East Africa is like, especially with Eritreans, right? Like we have to be like 10 times more prouder because one, we're a small country, and then two, like we're trying to disassociate ourselves from Ethiopia. And so there's this constant battle of like everyone policing us on how proud we can be about ourselves because we're trying to literally not be called Ethiopian in any type of space. But what ends up happening is everyone still groups us back with Ethiopia. And so, you know, like Iman and I talk about this all the time about how when in public, we'll introduce ourselves like, oh, she's Ethiopian, I'm Eritrean, and people will be like, oh, so like you're Ethiopian to me. And I'm like,
did you not listen to what we said?
The country. So I think a lot of times like that's also something that causes so much like over identifying ourselves, and it's disappointing because it's something that doesn't need to happen, but it happens because of the fact that other East Africans and even African and like just Black people in general are always constantly like disassociating like Eritrean, like, you know, their independence and stuff. And so it causes Eritreans to just over-identify themselves, and like then it looks like we're trying to be problematic and not be considered Black. And so it's just like a whole battle within itself. And I think like identity is like, yeah, like Iman was saying, like a really beautiful thing, but it's just like, why is it that you're so like keen on making sure everyone knows your identity? Like, what is your intention with that? Is it to make sure that people only identify you by that, or is it to actually identify yourself to know that you actually like should be identified properly, you know? So I think it's just, it really does play a part in like, especially how East Africans identify themselves. Cause I feel like a lot of times, the vast majority are identifying themselves with that identity because they want clout. Like they want the ability to be like, yeah, like I'm Eritrean, like, oh, I'm Ethiopian, like give me some clout. But it's like when I walk into a room and, you know, I'm with other Africans and I say, oh yeah, I'm Eritrean, and they're like, oh, you're Ethiopian. It's like, dang, like I just got completely pushed out the loop. So I think it really depends on intention at the end of the day when it comes to identity.
I think the older generation do a better job. Like I always talk about this, but like whenever I like run into like a Habesha uncle, like sorry, that's a lot of people feel uncomfortable with that. Like an Eritrean or Ethiopian uncle, it's like they ask if I'm, you know, am I Eritrean, am I Ethiopian? And I always say no, I'm not. But I like how they always go, oh yeah, they try to like they try to focus on how much we're in common. Is awkward. It's like, oh, but we're neighboring countries, we're the same, da da da. And they're like, yeah, I have a Somali friend. I'm like, oh, that's cute. Whereas I feel like our generation, like, or same thing, if somebody says they're Oromo, like I think older generation, they acknowledge your identity and they talk about how you guys come in close contact. Whereas our generation, we go, oh no, you can't say that. Like somebody says they're Oromo, some random ugly dusty man wants to tell you, and you can't say that. Who are you? This is America, baby. I can say whatever I want. You know what I mean? Whereas I feel like our older generation, from my interactions with them, I think they do a better job of like living in harmony, because I think they understand the consequences back home, what's going on more. But whereas us, the younger generation Z, for instance, I think they bring the drama back here, and they just, it's not for the right intentions, as you said. It's literally just to cause bulk, like loud, like chaotic.
I definitely agree with your points. I also think like the woman who was sitting next to you, you said she was West African, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to also acknowledge that majority of immigrants and refugees who come from Ethiopian, Eritrean, Somali backgrounds come from political instability, and they're refugees and they're here because of civil war and strife. And a lot of the times they, but a lot of West African immigrants come here for like educational reasons, work and stuff like that, and it's not really political instability. Although I'm not sure what's going on over there, but yeah. I'm sure that there's like similar situations. It's not exacerbated like in East Africa, but it probably exists, right? So a lot of the times, us being political and civil, like products of civil war, you know, of course we're going to bring that back here. We're going to have a lot of discussions about that, because it's like a part of our identities, you know what I mean? So what would you guys say preserves your piece about your East African identity? It could be anything, honestly, but something that you would feel preserves your piece. For me, it's like seeing that there's a lot of activism, there's a lot of unity, and there's more, there's less anti-blackness, and I'm seeing a lot of acceptance of blackness within our communities, and like celebration of different skin tones, celebration of different futures, and people are finally understanding that, you know, the phenotype that they associate with East Africans is monolithic. It's very small. Like some of the biggest Somali models, majority of Somali models are of darker skin, and like seeing that representation is beautiful to me. So that's what preserves my peace?
I would say one thing that really preserves my peace is the amount of empowerment that's going on within our women. Because, I mean, if we're really going to talk about it, like, our women were being trashed and dogged by men, you know? And so historically, like, we really didn't have any rights and just any meaning to, like, our own bodies. And so I'm just, like, really glad that, like, now, like, women are becoming more empowered. We're able to accept, like, empowerment by seeing ourselves as bosses, you know? And like actually seeing ourselves as like dominating people in like the workplaces, in culturally, even like accepting the fact that we're, you know, these dope people, we're these dope ass individuals that deserve credit for being just beautiful and just existing, and not taking shit from men. Because
get rid of them.
Yeah.
I can go next. I agree with everything you guys said. I also think like the little things of like more representation, I think just more conversations about this stuff is way more apparent than like when I was younger, because I feel like, you know, post college you kind of think like, you know, people have their own friend groups, like this kind of stuff just dies down or people don't care anymore. And I think that I've seen like across the communities, even different age groups, like this is a more reoccurring conversation. Like it's not being swept under the rug anymore. And I like that it's coming to light, because you just can't keep living in this fake harmony that, you know, everything is going Gucci back home, because it's not. But you need to talk about it. And I'm happy that now we're getting to a place where I think actual unity can happen if people are having, you know, honest discussions like they are right now. And also just representation, whether it's mainstream media or like social media. I've definitely seen a bigger surge of like, you know, Black Pan-Africanist like representation has been emerging, of not just showing that one light-skinned girl as the Black representation. So I love to see that. I love seeing it all like on my timeline, because that also helps you decolonize what you're seeing, because if all you see is light-skinned women with no waist and a big butt, you're like, damn, what am I seeing on my TL today? But now you're finally seeing like darker skinned women or people who look like you. You're like, dang, that's dope. So I like seeing that.
For me, I would say like kind of similar to what you said, Iman. What preserves my peace is that I'm happy that the East African diaspora, the Horn, we've been creating our own like sense of reality and like what we want to see in the world, like our own utopia. So I feel like Lona, for instance, like I always talk about Lona's interfaith. Like Lona's a Christian, but it like inspires me so much that like Lona is so respectful to the Muslim culture, and like she just makes me feel normal, and I don't feel Islamophobic. And same with her, like I love learning about the, you know, Orthodox Christian culture, and I want my kids to have like, you know, aunties who are Christian, who are in between, like, and something that I didn't have. And so I'm happy that the East African like diaspora, we're creating the utopia we want. Like we're gonna live in harmony by force. We're gonna have these conversations. We're gonna actually like talk about like the effed up shit we have, you know, internally, and how we can get rid of it. So I'm like really happy we're having that discussion, and even like seeing like Oromos and how to like all these people just having the discussion they need and how they can live in harmony, even if it's not back home. How can we live in harmony here? I think that was there's my piece, that we're having the dialogue and like normalizing the diversity within our community.
Definitely. For me, what preserves my peace, and it might be personal or maybe you guys can relate to it as well, is like the reconciliation of your identity abroad and home. Especially like as I grow up, I think I'm starting to see more people that like not know their place, but sometimes I think you often see like young naive diaspora who want to go back home and fix everything. I think we talked about it in our our second episode, which was about being American identity as well. But really the like reconciliation of, you don't like, your identities don't have to be mutually exclusive. I am Somali Oromo and I am American, you know. Big ups blue, my blue passport. No, I'm just kidding. I hate imperialism, but
right. About that.
I'm just kidding. But no, I think it's really, really beautiful to see that your identities don't have to be mutually exclusive. You are like, you contain multitudes and you are beautiful the way that you are. So I really love East African women. I love women, period.
We just got here.
And the two women we had with us today were Iman and Luna. We're so glad to have had you here. Is there anything else you'd like to say on the topic, or would you like to plug your upcoming project one more time?
I guess Alona can go first.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say shout out to y'all. I really love this podcast. Like, y'all, anyone who's listening to today needs to listen to all of the other videos that they posted, because they're dope ass women that really just talk about the shit that we need to talk about, because let's be honest, like our communities sometimes be really silent about things that should have not been silent about. And so I'm really glad that like these conversations are happening, and like y'all are both very like y'all three, are very intellectual women that are able to speak their mind and not be scared of the repercussions that can come from that. And so this is a really beautiful podcast, and I love that my peace is being disturbed, and that everyone else's peace is being disturbed. And yeah, like I just love y'all.
Stop it, so nice. Thank you.
Yeah, I was honestly like waiting for some type of podcast from y'all to drop, just because like we all like always have these conversations, and like I just like your guys' opinion is like very important. And like obviously women, like we don't have these spaces, like a safe space where we can speak our truth. Like as corny as it sounds, like I just see like we just say stuff on social media and stuff, but we don't have our own platforms aside from social media where we could just talk. So I think this space is like really dope, because I feel like you're bringing in women. You don't have to feel like, oh, I have this extensive research, I have this PhD, like I'm going to prove to you like why my opinion matters. It's more just like, no, this is how I feel, this is what I live, this is my experience. Let's talk about why this is an issue. And I think that's really important, especially because we all have been in academic spaces where like you have to have a certain degree or a status to feel like your opinion matters. So I just love that this space is like, now we're just going to talk about it all. We're just going to open the can of worms and get to it. So I love this diversity of friendship of all of us, you know, coming together, having this space and this conversation. And yeah, hopefully we can collaborate more, because this was fun, and love all of you guys. Appreciate this. Check out Shakur Entertainment once we have the podcast up and coming. But until then, check our IG page.
And we'll link
Can
it
you
for-
spell your IG page for them? And then
It's
we'll
kind
write
of
it
long.
as well.
It's kind of long.
Okay,
but
we'll write it. No worries.
It's at Shakur Entertainment. Shakur is like, it's spelled how it sounds. SHIKOR and then entertainment. Yeah.
Sounds good. We'll definitely
Thank
write
you,
that. Thank you
guys.
guys so much. For more Disturbing Your Peace, you can follow us on our IG page and our Twitter at DisturbingYP, our Facebook Disturbing Your Peace page, and you can follow us on our new YouTube channel, Disturbing Your
Hey.
Peace. Gang,
We
gang,
love
gang,
it.
gang.
We
Thank
love
you
to see
guys so much for your time.
Bye.
Bye.